Two. Okay, we're live. I wanted to hit live, but then ask why you found Instagram as kind of like your go-to going live outlet.
So Instagram like became my home, like right during like the whole like pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started the Death Empath. I really like hit it hard, and I found that it was like this really beautiful like way to like be a part of the community and build like a collective, and so it just feels like a home, like home base,
Yeah.
and the interactions there always seem very genuine and very authentic. So I love going live there. I
Mm-hmm.
also really love going live on TikTok, but I realize they're like different energies. Like the frequency on TikTok is very like you just have so many people jumping in that are like random, right? They're like, "Oh, hey, what's up? What are we talking about? What's going on? What's happening? Who are you?"
Yeah,
And
yeah.
on Instagram, it's like a very like, it's like your family. It's like a very specific type of community.
Mm.
Um, but TikTok interacts. Like TikTok, they're like question after question after question. What's up? What's going on? Hi
Oh,
from
yeah.
Germany.
Uh,
Instagram, there's like sometimes just crickets and they're just like observing and watching
yep.
what you're saying. So like, yeah, I love both for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I've been experimenting with the different social media outlets and then seeing like where wanting to serve like putting my energy in kind of one place consistently. And so
Hmm.
YouTube live streaming on YouTube is like the like let's get this to work
Nice.
experiment of the day. Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and for being here. I figure we'll take about an hour or so. And you can go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience if you would like to.
Sure. I'm Jessica Reese, or Jess, or Reese. I'm the Death Empath. I'm a death doula for people and pets, and I specialize in energetic living deaths and also transitional spaces.
Okay, you said energetic living deaths and transitional spaces.
Yeah.
Okay, could you talk some more about those?
Yeah, so we experience different types of death in our lifetime. So we all are very familiar with real deaths, which is when someone actually physically dies. But
Mm-hmm.
living and energetic deaths are something that we experience quite often. So an energetic death is something like an ego death, like death of a dream or an aspiration. And then a living death is like a death of a relationship, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like a death of a friendship or actual death of like a marriage or a partnership.
Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. And how long have you been doing this work?
I did my training. It's going to be 5 years next month, which is really
Oh,
exciting. And I went full time a year and a half ago. So, like, right when the pandemic started, um, I had already transitioned from my previous work. And I was like, all right, I was a high profile event producer. So I
okay.
stopped doing that. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like full lockdown, like no more events. I was like,
Ah,
whoa, that's kind of fun. That's kind of interesting. And then so I decided to do this work full time in a
okay.
virtual space. And it really took off. And I feel so in alignment with this work. I feel so like this is my purpose. This is my
Mm,
dharma.
yes.
It feels like it was waiting for me. It's like, come on, let's do this. So
Well, that's awesome. I'm interested to hear more about your evolution into becoming a death doula, especially coming from like an event planning background.
so I actually I call it my first lifetime. I was a performing artist. So I went to school for dance and
Mm.
theater. And I had like a dance school. I was a dance teacher. It was amazing. I offered free classes for underprivileged children, and that I was like so happy and fulfilled. And I loved telling people I was a dance teacher. But then I
Mhm.
got injured. I got a really bad back injury, and I had to shift gears. And I found myself in the event space because it has like a similar creative kind of energy to it, like vibe to it, and the disciplines there, and you get to like kind of almost felt like choreograph a bit,
Mhm.
right? So instead of putting the dance in like a physical way, I put it like in a aesthetic kind of way.
Yes.
Um, but I was going through like severe burnout. I was using work as a form of addiction and to cope. So
Mhm.
I've struggled with chronic depression, high functioning strong chronic depression my whole life, like since I was like 12, 13, because I was sexually abused when I was really little. And I learned to like mask and like pretend and to hide. And then I learned to really as my work, like I get into this like hyper focus and I don't have
Mhm.
to like think about anything else. And so I was like managing my depression, but I still had like suicide ideation. I still wasn't like super happy, still didn't like really care to be here. I
Mhm.
wanted to like unalive myself all the time, not
Mhm.
really doing it, but the thoughts were constantly there. So then my husband's grandmother passed away by herself. Like there was like some miscommunication that happened. And now with the work that I do, I understand that she wanted to die alone.
Mhm.
But at that time, she died alone and it was like very like a culture shock. So I'm Mexican American and that's just like something that was like new to me. Like we don't let our elders die alone. It's just our culture, right?
Mhm.
And that led me down the path of like, oh, I want to find out if there's a way to like volunteer for people who
Yes.
are like dying alone. And the statistics of people dying alone in nursing homes is so high. And it was like such a like a heartbreak. So I was doing all this research and this term like end of life doula, death midwife, death companion, death walker, all these terms came up and I really resonated with that kind of support, right? So death doulas are these like end of life besties, like these people who are like, I'm going to sit with you. This seems hard to a lot of people, but I want to make sure that you're like energetically, you are being held and like loved on.
Mhm.
And so I booked my training and I did my training within like a few weeks. And then I was like this death doula. And I
Mhm.
was doing it like as a volunteer for another 3 years. I still had my job and I was just like doing it here and there, volunteering, helping people with their pets and
Mhm.
giving them advice for their family members. But the burnout turned into becoming chronically ill.
Mm.
And I was just like in major survival mode. My tendencies to self harm when I was younger turned into self harming via my work addiction,
Mhm. Like
right?
a I'm gonna hide behind altruism, but it's self harm type of thing.
It was like self-sacrificing.
Mhm.
Like more like I didn't realize I was doing it. I
Mhm.
thought it was like oh no, 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 I'm a boss babe and look at how successful I am and I have like this six-figure business and I'm doing I finally had something to like be proud of in a societal way. Like
Mhm.
I wasn't just this like floating dancer, this like, dance teacher who was kind of aimless. I finally had like a
Mhm.
legitimate, societally accepted like career.
Mhm.
And I was able to hide everything in that. So my mom wasn't so worried about me all the time, like my whole family knew I was like this high functioning person who was chronically
Mhm.
depressed. And they're always worried that I was, not in a stable place. But once I had this career, everyone's like, oh, she's fine now. Look at her. She got all her stuff together.
Mhm.
But in the background, like on that subconscious level, I really was more of a just using it to like buy my time. um, so I ended up getting really, really sick. I was exposed to mold, so I was like dealing with burnout, mold
Mhm.
sickness.
Mhm.
The mold sickness paved the way to for me to get like invasive streptococcus, like
Mhm.
strep, but
Mhm.
it's like gets beyond like the throat area and it goes into your body because my defenses were so low.
Gotcha.
And so I'm in like this place of being really, really sick and death doula ship was like my saving grace.
Mm.
Was like that place where I was like, okay, I need to hold on to something.
Mm.
And death work was that for me. And the deeper I got into death work, I ended up being my maternal grandmother's death guide. The more I felt like in alignment
Mhm.
and the easier it was to like exist in this earth plane.
Mhm.
And I was like finding my flow and the rhythm and it was helping me heal. And yeah, that was like my path to find my real calling, which
Mhm.
is being with people in those really dark shadow places where we tend to isolate and feel like we're totally broken and we don't want anyone to see us and we shield ourselves from everyone and everything. And I'm that person who like steps into those that abyss, that darkness, and I go, "Hey, look, here's my hand. I've been here. I got you. Don't worry. There's no
Mhm.
judgment. There's no criticism here. Like human spirit to spirit, like, what do you need? Let me support you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I really am the happiest I've ever been.
Oh, that's awesome.
Really. Yeah.
Do you find that when people are in that vulnerable space and you show up as that like non-judgmental support person, are people do they usually surrender to that, or has is it like being met in that space is completely new to them and there's more resistance?
The people that are generally called to like work with me already kind of understand like my energy and my frequency, and so they already feel safe and nurtured. And so there's no resistance. I think it's more of a like feeling of relief, like, oh, okay, cool. I can actually now let my guard down.
Yeah.
Um, in the beginning, when I first started doing like a lot of guidance calls, I'd have like maybe I can maybe say like under a handful of people that at first there was like that resistance to, but that had more to do with them finding themselves and their like intuitive abilities and their gifts. So I am a channeler as well. And so I use my intuitive abilities to like help support people in their coming out. I always say coming out of the broom closet. Where I just like want to really acknowledge and like validate, like, no, no, yes, I'm sensing the same stuff you're sensing. I definitely get the vibe of like you having these abilities. And in those spaces, I've met some resistance because there's a lot of fear around showing up as yourself in general, right? But when you have abilities, clairs, psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, those have been shut down for so long in our society that we have a lot of like wounding around it.
Mm-hmm.
And we always tend to, a lot of us tend to feel like, oh, am I crazy?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to tell people because we're afraid like people are going to think I'm crazy and not take me seriously. And um, that rejection of self is so big
Mm-hmm.
that I think that's the only time that I really meet that kind of resistance. But
Mm-hmm.
then when they realize I'm like, no, I'm here for it. I want to see all of you and like, support it, then people really just like ease into the space
Mm-hmm.
and feel a lot more comfortable.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the like coming out of the broom closet analogy. I actually asked that question in my private Facebook group earlier today. I was like, who all has experienced the coming out of the broom closet and how was that for you? Because someone was asking like, oh, like I came out and how do I deal with my religious family and all of that? And I'm just like, oh, that like being on the other side of it, I'm like, oh, that's some juicy good work. But like being in that, I don't know what to do besides show up as the like, hey, I see you in all of your juiciness and like I invite you to like go deeper into that.
Yeah. Um, so my family is mostly agnostic and atheist. Like I wasn't really raised with religion.
Okay.
So it was for me, I'm on the other side of that where
Mm-hmm.
my family doesn't believe in anything,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just kind of looking at me like, where the freak did you come from? Because I'm not even like the traditional like religious kind of in their minds, like it's not a traditional
Mm-hmm.
path. I decided to totally veer and be like, I'm just gonna go into like our heritage, and I'm going to look at brujeria and curanderismo and Mexican shamanism, and they're just like, and I'm like, guys, we are Yaqui and Mayo. Like, why wouldn't I go to my indigenous roots,
Mm-hmm.
and find spirituality there? So yeah, like I that's the conversations that are now starting to happen
Mm-hmm.
because they're looking at my work and they're just like, so what are you doing now?
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So as far as the more like formal training that you got, what was that?
Oh, okay. So as a death doula, there's two different types, right? You have your modern death doula, which is what a lot of people are kind of looking at like as formal training.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through a NELDA, which is the International End of Life Doula Association.
Okay.
And the way they describe being a death doula is like a non-medical end of life support system,
Mm-hmm.
advocate, and like death educator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then really trying to help the person who's actually passing in their end of life or help people really prepare. So administratively, like get all your stuff in order. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Let me help you plan your vigil. What does your funeral look like? What are your burial plans, cremation plans? Did
Yep.
you know there are these new eco-friendly versions of all
Mm-hmm.
that? So that's like the right now a modern death doula. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a hybrid of modern death doulaship. Like I have expansions through the Birth, Breath, and Death Institute for pregnancy and infant loss, grief support, shadow work. I also did an expansion in being an abortion doula
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of grief in that space. But then you have the ancient death doula,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, death not being a part of our life cycle is like this new thing. Within the last like 100 years or so, uh, death not being like a conversation that's like readily had is something like that wasn't happening
Mm-hmm.
100 years ago. Like we had postmortem photos in the
Mm-hmm.
Victorian Edwardian times. We
It was
had
like the wake used to be in the home, stuff like
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah,
like
yeah.
death in the
We,
home,
we would
wake
work.
in the home.
Yeah, we would wear jewelry with like people's hair and teeth on it, Like we would dress in all black for a year to let
Mm-hmm.
people know that we were mourning. So, um, the ancient death doula is more of a like a natural uh, kind of you're in those positions of death and dying because you just are pulled to it and you have sat with loved ones and family members and pets, animals and sat with them in their transition, almost like it would be like a rite of passage
Mm-hmm.
in different cultures around the world, right? There's a sacredness in it. So it's more of a natural part of the life cycle culturally. And so that's more of an ancient death doula. Like it's always been with us,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of understanding of death and that we're just coming home to it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just reactivating something that was already there is the ancient death doula approach. So I'm a hybrid of both. I've done the traditional training, but also death is a huge part of the Mexican culture. And so
Yeah.
I was never shielded from death. We have something called novenas, which is like a 9-day vigil where we're doing the rosary and doing, songs and crying together as a community, as a family. We have the Day of the Dead. We have death spirits and guides and
Mm-hmm.
death dogs. And, so like death was very much already a part of my culture, and I just stepped into this calling
Mm-hmm.
on that side. And then I'm doing the decolonization work, the shamanism, understanding the folklore and the history
Mm-hmm.
of like the ancient stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. As far as the ancient stuff, what do you think has led to the aversion towards like being with death in life for the last 100 years?
there's a couple things, but medical advancements in
They're like,
yeah,
let's just prevent it at all costs. Let's go.
exactly. So like the advancements in technology has really kind of veered us off of that death being a part of the life cycle because now a lot of people die in medical facilities, right? So they now are dealing with medical deaths over saying, hey, like, I don't want to die hooked up to machinery. Like, I want to die in my own home.
Mm-hmm.
However, people, because we don't talk about the patterning of end of life and what that really looks like, a lot of us try to hold on to our loved ones and to ourselves as long as possible. And so we believe that we are the exception,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we're like, no, 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 a miracle's going to happen. I'm going to, put my family member on all these like machines and science is going to save them. Or, medical advances are going to save them. And that's generally not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Most people do end up dying in have a medical death because themselves or their loved ones weren't with the pattern of end of life, weren't like um, sitting with the realization that they were dying.
Mm-hmm. Like acceptance.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of people go into hospice too late or like go into hospice and they end up passing away within a few days. Like usually hospice, like you'll work with someone in hospice for 11 days is like the norm, maybe 2 weeks. But typically they go into hospice and they die within a few days.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's like not say getting less of care that they could be getting at that time, because that lack of acceptance is like
Mhm.
not creating space for that.
Yeah, and they care in a different way, like really planning their end of life. What does that look like if they haven't had the opportunity to do so?
Hmm.
So some people are do like, the end of life, the basics, like is their estate, their will. They get their plot in the, cemetery that they want to be buried in, or they like pay for their cremation. But they don't really talk about anything beyond that, which is like, well, do you want to die at home? Do you want to die in the hospital?
Hmm.
Majority of people, when you ask them that question, they want to die at home.
Yeah.
They want to be surrounded by the things that they love, their comforts,
Yeah.
and that freaks a lot of people out, right? Like people are
Mm.
like, "Well, wait a second, but are they going to haunt the house the rest of the time?" Where before, like you said, people would have the wake at home,
We could be so
and
honored.
yeah, and then there's a lot more control in your end of life than you realize. Like a lot of people don't
Mhm.
realize, like when you start really planning your legacy work, like what do you want to leave behind? Do you want to leave letters, notes, recordings, videos? Do you want to photo albums? A lot of us don't even really know our great grandparents,
Mhm.
what they were like. So
Mhm.
imagine if they had put together something of their lives and who they were, even if it was like a story written down or something, like we could have more access to them that way.
Yeah.
So there's legacy work or your vigil. Vigils are such a beautiful way of like, this is your final kind of walkabout. This is like your final, you
Wow.
know,
Yes.
um, journey right before your transition. And what does that look like to
Mhm.
you? Are you
Mhm.
outside? Are you indoors? Are there plants around you, flowers, animals, like family members? Do you want people to dance, play their favorite music, like each individual come and like read a poem to you or leave you with one final saying or goodbye? Do you want people to have their shoes on, shoes off? Do you want incense burning? You know what I mean? Like you're really designing this like final journey.
Mhm.
And what does that look like? And you get to really, really plan it the way you want it to be.
Mhm.
And because there's so much unknown in that space that your loved ones are like, can I touch them? Can I not touch them? Can I hold them? Can I climb into bed? We tend to leave a lot of those like big decisions to our loved ones that are in the processing of possibly losing us, the shock of it all, the grieving already that may be happening, the,
Mhm.
not knowing what they feel. And then we're asking them on top of that, by the way, if I have to be resuscitated, I want you to make that choice. Or I didn't really make any funeral arrangements, so I'm going to have you as your
Oh
in
my
shock of
god.
it all, putting it all
Yeah.
together.
I can't imagine that even just in the hypothetical. Like, oh my gosh. Mm-mm. Mm.
Yeah, or I didn't put together a will or any kind of estate planning, and you have to go through all my belongings and figure out how to divvy everything up and who gets what and how. And then this is when arguments start to happen because people get really strange in their grieving. And then when it comes to especially like monetary or things like material things, um, things start getting weird and sideways, and
Yeah.
parts of people come out in a way that are unexpected because we all process our losses very differently.
Mhm.
And sometimes we want to control situations. And so we like, no, 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 I don't want you to sell mom's house. Like,
Yeah.
I want to keep it. And the other siblings are like, no, we need to sell mom's house. Like, why would we just keep it? It's just going to be sitting there. No, no, I want to move into it. And then it gets weird and
Yeah.
ugly.
Mhm.
Um, and then people don't know, like, what do you want for do you
Mhm.
want end of life celebration or a funeral?
Mhm.
Do you want to invite the whole neighborhood? Do you want me to post it on social media? What do you want your obituary to say?
Uh,
There's a lot. There's a
it's like
lot of,
they are such important questions, and then like when meeting the mind outside of processing, oh, I might be dying right now, it's so much easier to see this is really important to sort out, to have the support like you do in sorting that out and seeing the potential peace that's part of the legacy, like I want to leave you peace and clarity when I do go, if that's what they want.
yeah, because imagine, and I see this a lot where even in my own like family and close circle, where their family members didn't really have anything kind of organized or planned.
Hmm.
And it takes them like a solid 2 to 4 months, if not even 6 months, to work out all the financials and the properties and the belongings and where they're going to be donated or, given to different family members and sent and cleaned up, houses cleaned up and things paid off and taxes. So once they're finally done with all that, that's really when they start even absorbing their loss. They haven't had a moment to breathe.
Yeah, it's kind of like the I'm gonna stay so busy with work that I don't have to feel or process some emotions that I don't want to.
But it's not even a choice.
Uh,
They're thrown into all of that because now they're responsible for everything that you didn't
mm-hmm,
plan.
mm-hmm,
So imagine like you didn't do anything.
mm-hmm,
You're young, right? And God forbid, like God forbid you die tomorrow, right? Because no one
mm-hmm,
knows. Our end of life is, we don't know. It's old age is not guaranteed.
mm-hmm,
So let's say some tragedy happens to you
mm-hmm.
tomorrow. Who's going to be tasked with sorting through your wherever you live?
Right.
Your belongings, and who's going to take care of you if you have pets? Who gets your dog or your cat or your lizards? Like, where
Mm-hmm.
does all this stuff go?
Who
What
gets
are
my
your
Bitcoin?
Yeah, who gets your Bitcoin? What are your passwords? Where do you have your digital, like all your digital information? How do people access your email? What if you're in a car accident and your phone breaks and they don't have access to any of your digital footprint? How do
Mm-hmm.
they take your website down? How do they, like there's a lot there, and you're leaving this to a family member that has to make all these decisions for you, and so, or family members, and they have to put their emotions and their processing on the back burner to organize all this. So
Mm-hmm.
when that's all done, that's when they finally get to start processing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And like, as this is so important, I'm wondering how do you encourage people to open up talking about this as an end of life planning? Because I know sometimes I've always been very pro death and like let's talk about it and little to no shame, But I'll go to
Yeah.
talk to say my parents about it or someone in my family, and the receptivity will not be there. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to force talking about anything if the receptivity is not there. There's like that wisdom part, but there's also
Mhm.
like, but we gotta talk, like time is only running out. So I'm like, how to do that dance, back to dancing, like how to do that dance when the partner is like terribly resistant to doing that dance.
So there's a few things you can do. I always like to model behavior. So I do something first and I'm like, hey, look, I got this done, or I'm about to do my advanced medical directives. Want me to come over? We can do our advanced medical directives together. But also I love using the death deck, which is
Ooh.
like, I don't know if you've seen the death deck. It's a card game. And it's a great way to just ask like one or two questions that are kind of random, because it's legitimately like a card deck.
Mm-hmm.
It has like 62 questions, if not more. And then you just go like, hey, let's do two of these. Like, let's make talking about end of life a little more casual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because what happens is when we come from a place of like, hey, we need to get all this stuff done, it becomes very overwhelming. The
Mm-hmm.
topic of death is incredibly overwhelming in general for a majority of people, and a lot of people too have fear of death and death anxiety. So the death deck, this card game is a really great way to start like getting to know one another, because the questions aren't just all about like direct, hey, if you die, do you want me to like put it on social media right away? Like it's like that. It's like lighthearted
Yeah.
instead of all the really heavy, who gets your house? Who gets
Yeah.
your car? Like that gets overwhelming for people.
Are there like
Um,
levels to the questions where they get more intense?
well, it depends. They're kind of they do range, and they're kind of color coordinated, so you can literally just like pull like the purple out or the yellow out, I think are the colors. But they're more random. Like, when you die, and do you hope to meet certain celebrities, like
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. It's a way to just like get to know one another, and then also to ask some tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like books that can help you in a fun way, like plan your funeral, or maybe, hey, simple questions like, do you want like a traditional wake, or do you want like a celebration of life? Like I'm thinking about mine, and I'm thinking I would love a celebration of life. Is that something you would want? And like model behavior first, like what you want, and then casually open a conversation that way. the
Mm-hmm.
death deck. You know, I when I was younger was very, I guess, hmm, abrupt. Like I just like fill this book out. This is all the information
Mm-hmm.
that I need. So, but I learned now that it's really more about patience. But once you open up the door for someone, more conversation starts happening more readily.
Mm-hmm. That makes
So
sense.
it's more about like frequency and
Mm-hmm.
casualness, and you get so far when people feel safe, and not being attacked.
Exactly.
Yeah, and death is very hard for a lot of people. Like talking about death and dying is very difficult. One of the things I like to do, and this is coming through specifically for you, by the way, and
Mhm.
I don't know why, but it's like some channeled information that came through. So if I have permission to share it with you,
Please.
asking questions about your grandparents
Mm-hmm.
and like great grandparents, like who were they, how were they? That'll help lead you into the other conversations
Oh,
about,
oh, yes, yes, yes.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if they were buried, is that what you want? Do you want to
Mm-hmm.
be buried with your parents or with your grandparents? Like, is that something that sounds like appealing to you to go back home? Like, what was that like? Or,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really beautiful way to segue because you're not only getting information about your ancestors and where you came from, it's also in a safe environment, asking your loved ones, like, if they want similar things or if they would have changed anything. Was
Mm-hmm.
it hard for them?
Yeah.
How did
Mhm.
they experience the death of their loved ones in that way?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm also very curious about how much you work with like the afterlife. Like death has happened. One on the physical side, like things with the physical body, but more so like the psychopomp work, like the spiritual aspect of it.
So I am a channeler, but I channel people.
Okay.
I don't call in spirits or ancestors. That's not my gifts. However, when I'm tapped into the person I'm working with, that they have those abilities, and certain things will definitely come through.
Mm.
Like if they have the ability to tap into ancestors or spirits, that stuff will come through. However, when I'm working with someone and they're trying to connect to a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
energetically, that's very easy for me to do
Gotcha.
because our loved ones live with us in a few different ways, right? So biologically, genetically, our loved ones live with us, like literally inside of our bodies, organs, blood cells. So I can very easily tap into the energy of that and activate those frequencies. However, our memories are also these living timelines. And
Mm.
so I like to create visualizations and help you tap into your loved one from that visualization. It's almost like time shifting or time traveling, but it's all in the mind and the
Mm.
brain. And it's like the mind doesn't necessarily know the difference between a memory and a visualization. So it's a lot easier to start having dialogue and conversations with your loved ones in that visualized space.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I work. I work more with like the quantum state than just like mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
and the occult. Like I feel that they're the same at some point. Science is really going to be able to, quantum especially, science
Mm-hmm.
is really going to start understanding or explaining how we feel about magic
Yeah.
and metaphysics and all that stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. I think science is now going to start explaining these things about frequencies and the biofield and why we are so intuitive, and that's like a total part of the human state, and
Mm-hmm.
like why some of us are seemingly telepathic. And so that's where I work more on quantum consciousness and the quantum state, which is pretty much magic.
Yeah.
Channeled information and magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you're working with a client, how long after they're parting, say, do you continue to work with the family or like still work with that energy? Or like in general, how long do you typically work with clients?
I mean, it kind of depends. So, because of the pandemic, we as death doulas weren't allowed, to go into spaces anymore, right? So,
Yeah.
we learned, a lot of us, how to adapt and start doing a lot of virtual support. And unfortunately, when I'm working with someone who's in hospice and I'm having direct line of contact and they pass away, I'm that's it. I'm now saying goodbye to them in a spiritual level and doing like a closing ceremony with them and a goodbye ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'll have family members reach out if they're called to do so. I haven't had a whole lot of in this new virtual space. I haven't had a lot of family members go like, "Hey, thank you so much. You were with so and so. Now I want to work with you," because
Gotcha.
there hasn't been the opportunity to interact because they're isolated. So I've been specifically working with people who are like texting me back and forth or DMing me back and forth who are in
Mhm.
hospice themselves,
Whoa.
and then they pass, and so I have to like reach out to like a hospice worker that's there or
Mhm.
call the hospice and say, "Hey, this was my client. Are they no longer with us?" And they're like, "Yeah, they passed away 2, 3 days ago." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay." I mean, I felt it. Like, obviously, when you don't have contact with someone who's in hospice for 24 hours, they're either no longer able to communicate, they're in and out of consciousness, or they have indeed passed on.
Mhm.
So, right now, there hasn't been that transition like there would be before. But I mean, I just, to people, grieving is everywhere right now.
Mhm.
Grief is everywhere. So many of us have experienced so many different losses,
Mhm.
physical, living, energetic. Like we are still living through such a whirlwind, crazy, unexpected, unprecedented kind of like situation, right? So
Mhm.
I think we're now just starting to process what we went through
Right.
that this last year and a half. So I've been really just working with people more on, you know, um, them losing multiple family members at once, compounded grief, losing themselves, losing their pets, just trying to get their bearings. And so
Yeah.
I've been working with people more in that space,
Mhm.
and trying to reconnect and trying to help them connect to family members that they couldn't see because they were isolated.
Mhm.
So that's been kind of like the breadth of my work. And also, I've been leading a lot of groups.
Okay.
Yeah. So, trying to work with as many people as I can at once versus just one-on-one support.
Exactly. So you do the one-on-one support. You're looking to expand to do more group work. Has that been looking like Zoom calls, or like in what capacity have you been doing that?
Yeah, I actually do one-on-one support and group now.
Yeah.
So I create very specific group programs. So the Human Psychopomp Club, which I just had, was a self-grieving, self-honoring, and
Mhm.
self-healing in a safe container where you're witnessed and held and supported, and really kind of allowing yourself to be vulnerable with your emotions and your feelings. And
Mhm.
then the second group I'm starting, it actually starts in September, is the Death Serpent Sisterhood, which is more
Mhm.
about being seen in your sovereignty and showing up without feeling like you're going to be judged. And then I'm going to have just the Grievers Club, where it's just coming in because you all have experienced the loss
Yeah.
and you want to talk about it.
Okay.
So that's been beautiful because I get to work with like 20, 30 people in one group. And
Mhm.
then my one on one calls tend to be um, guidance and spiritual support. And
Mhm.
then also I have this very specific one-on-one called quantum healing sessions,
Okay.
which is more where I help people come out of the broom closet
Yeah.
or give them more like oracle readings on kind of life path, finding their footing, doing activations in that space.
Yeah.
I do like a custom meditation for them, and then I'll do like a reading.
Awesome. Awesome. And you're saying people mostly find you through Instagram then?
Yeah, I've been having mostly it was Instagram, and then I was doing a lot of like witch events, like witch walk, which people were finding me there. But now on TikTok,
Mhm.
I have a really large following there. I have a really large audience. Now my TikTok is trickling into my Instagram, and then
Yes.
yeah, booking sessions with me from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see you killing it on like the real slash TikTok-y stylistic platform, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just like, yes.
TikTok has been really receptive. Instagram, like I said, it was like my home base, and I really love it. It's like just a different energy altogether. But the algorithm has made it really difficult to get traction. I was doing really well, and then I got COVID, and
Mhm.
I've had long COVID, and I'm like just now coming out of it,
Gotcha.
and I lost the momentum there. But I jumped on TikTok, and I'm at like 77,000 followers
What?
in under 2 months. So
Hey.
yeah, it's been really receptive, and people just are have a lot of questions, and need a lot of support in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think with last year and everything that's happening, I agree. I think we're finally coming around to processing, like, oh my gosh, because
Yeah.
it was such like surreal survival mode. But now that some time has passed, do you feel like this will ultimately shift us into becoming more death positive as a culture, both in like physical death and also just kind of like getting our brains and nervous system more adaptable to change and resiliency?
I think eventually, I think this is an opportunity for that to happen. Absolutely. However, processing can take some time.
Mm,
Um, what I'm sensing from the collective is right now that we're distracting
mm,
from, like, we're starting to feel the processing, but we're also distracting because we were in such a state of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Like we're trying to get back to like decompress our nervous system. We're trying to like regulate.
yeah.
And regulation really looks like, for a lot of people, like, I need to get out. I need to go do things. I need to be around people. I need to say hi to my family. And we're all in this kind of like desperation to be out and socialize again with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we're not completely feeling the full effects of the processing,
Mm,
which is absolutely normal, by the way. That it's like nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I don't think that we're going to start seeing the emotions, and I think we're just now starting to see some people like resistant to working, resistant to going back to work because it's traumatizing. Because
mhm.
we did adapt to being at home and realize like what lives we were really living, and the go 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 and the constant, and like we were in this rat race, fast paced momentum. And like we never really asked ourselves why. And
Mhm.
now we're asking the why. And a lot of us are now like triggered and traumatized, and we can't go back and work. We don't
Yeah.
even know how we did it before. And, it's going to take us some time to get to that place of like recognizing that's where we are. And I see it in the holidays. I see it once we're like, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the New Year, I'm going to see us, because everything starts to slow down. I'm going to start seeing us kind of go as a collective. Holy, did we just experience that whole like year and a half that we just did? And if we end up going back into like lockdown or some other stuff, I think it's just going to compound the kind of like anxiety that a lot of us are trying to regulate ourselves through.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and like what do you think are some of the best things we can do to regulate having gone through the last year and a half together as people? Because of course there's the individual dealing with it, but I'm really looking at it on this cultural level, seeing where a lot of people might be fighting for maybe reasons that are just distractions, you know? So I'm thinking like how on a human level can we collect almost like collective grief ritual, you know, when people don't even want to face grief or death. I'm like, dang, is that unrealistic to want? But no, it's like owning that I do desire that on some level.
Um, I think the first thing is allowing ourselves to show up as human beings,
Mm,
as perfectly flawed, as like we're not machines, and we have feelings, and there's a lot of power in our emotions. And starting to shift the idea of like mind over matter, like our brain is like the ultimate thing to like hack and figure out and control, and shifting it to more like, no, my emotions are my guide. My emotions are meant to be expressed and
mhm,
released and felt, because if not, this like holding on to them and like pushing them aside and pretending like they don't exist only has caused me detriment and like pain and illness, and and not feeling human.
mhm,
And so I think it's that like leaning into our very human selves first, and then leaning on each other as a community, because grief is meant to be shared.
mhm.
Like,
That's why this
it,
is so tricky. It's like grief is meant to be
yeah,
shared, but then there's
mhm,
this call to isolation, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
how?
yeah. And again, like, it's okay that you feel like you need to isolate sometimes. It's okay that you feel like you're just gonna Netflix and grieve it up for like a whole day, but your community. But the idea that your community is still there waiting for you as an anchor, when you're ready to come out and interact and ask for their support and their help. That's the whole point, that grief is meant to be seen and witnessed and held in a community and in the collective. And we have really learned to hide all our pain and all our suffering because we don't want to inconvenience others. But then as a society, we've also learned to be dismissive and give platitudes because we're awkward about things and we don't know exactly what to say. And so
Mhm.
it really has more about just starting to have conversations about how we're really feeling and having guidance to help us navigate how to hold space for one another, how to be supportive,
Mhm.
and not just, no, thank you. Oh my God, I don't know what to do. And just like
Yeah,
walk away.
yeah, I feel like you're really getting at the empath part of it, like how to not shy away from witnessing someone in their vulnerability, and maybe you don't know what to say, but you can even say like, I don't even know what to say right now, or like, I don't have all of the scripts, but yeah, knowing
Mhm.
that it can feel awkward but still be so meaningful to that person.
There is the I don't know what to say, but something that's even more powerful is I have nothing to say.
Yeah, it's like, I have nothing to say.
Yeah, I have nothing to say, but I'm here supporting you however, you need me to, but I'm literally just standing here as your beacon and human support, allowing you to just be and feel and do all the things you need to do. But I don't need to say anything to you. I have nothing to say.
Mm-hmm.
All I have to offer you is my love and my support. Like, because there's nothing you can say. You can literally say, there's nothing I can say to make you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing I can say that's going to make you, all of this go away. So I
Yeah.
don't need to say anything. I just need to tell you that you have my support. I just need to let you know that I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Is that to say, like, you're not trying to make them feel better? You're trying to witness and hold space for how they are authentically feeling, trusting that they will process that?
Yeah. That's the one thing that I try to really impart quite often is that grief isn't meant to be solutionized. Your grief is not meant to be fixed. There's no fixing it. There's literally just holding space for it and witnessing it and being that anchor of support to those around you that are grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because they're completely lost.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to find their footing and their foothold. And how do you solutionize that? Like you can't. You don't even know which direction they're going in. They're like all over the place. So it's just a matter of just allowing yourself to be. It's an honor to witness someone in their grief. Like someone who trusts you enough, you feel like a safe person to them to for them to fully unfurl and unshield and be in their rawness. That's an
Yeah.
honor to be able to hold someone in that space, to witness this nakedness that most of us really don't ever get to see in each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it from a place of more of like empowerment in human nature and building a stronger connection and bridging this these surface level interactions we have with one another and
Mm-hmm.
really s- cycling your energy with this person. Transmuting and alchemizing is different than solutionizing. Saying, I'm going to give a piece of me to you to keep you afloat, and we're going to cycle, and I'm going to like hold that energy with you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not alone in your heaviness and your sadness and your suffering. I am holding this with you. I am holding you. I am that earthbound energy that you need right now, that grounding force while you go and you float into the ether of pain and sorrow. So it's really more like we see grief and death, I feel sometimes as these like very physical kind of black and white things when they're incredibly cosmic.
Mm-hmm.
They're incredibly like um spiritual, that connection of astral and cosmic and earthbound and like the connection between the portals, like that's
Mm-hmm.
really where this space lives. Like
Mhm.
death and grief live in that liminal space of being
Mm.
human and just this like spiritual energy source, right? And
Mhm.
we shy away from something that can really help us understand the whole aspects of life and living,
Mhm.
right? So that's something that I'm constantly trying to help people understand. Like they're being in those spaces are a gift. They're a gift because there's so much wisdom in
Mhm.
that space. There's so much to be learned in that space. And we all tend to go like, no, 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 it's scary. I don't want to think about it. And it's literally death is just like sitting there going like, I've walked with you your whole life. I
Mhm.
have been this guiding force your whole life. I'm not meant to be shied away from or something you should be afraid of. I'm meant to be embraced so that you live bigger, so you live exactly the lives that you want to lead, so that you get to know yourself to such an extent that you're following your true calling and your dharma, so that you can have that good death that everyone talks about, no
Mhm.
matter at what age.
Yeah.
Um, that's how I see death.
Mhm.
That's how I see grief. I
Mhm.
see it as a state of empowered consciousness.
Mm. Mhm. That is so awesome. Yeah, or like at least an invitation to step into as much of that space as that person wants to and is able to. But if they are down
Right.
for that journey, what are the limits of that? Like, I don't even know. But like, I'm excited to find out one day, if I get like all my affairs in order first so I can like be just focused
Yeah.
on that.
But you see people evolve and change in end of life spaces. You see people who haven't talked to each other in 20 years make amends. You see I'm sorry. I love you. I'm grateful. I appreciate everything you've done. I wouldn't be who I am without you. You see these total human connections happen in this space that for most of us seems so dark and scary,
Mm-hmm.
when it's this like illuminating love, energetic bond, collective connection. Like it, when I see this space, it's so cosmic and celestial to me. It literally feels like how people just like when you're watching like like those cosmos documentaries,
Mm-hmm.
they're giving you like the celestial bodies. It literally feels like that to me. Like I'm in that space observing the the passage of human to cosmos,
Yeah.
that shift occurring. And I'm like, how does the cosmos even live inside
It's
this very
like
physical body?
inhale,
Yeah,
exhale, inhale, exhale.
yeah,
This like
yeah,
grand level. Oh my gosh.
yeah. And it's so crazy because you stop thinking of yourself as just this like small nothingness in the world. Like a lot of people just feel like, oh, this like human being, just existing in the world. It's like, no, like the cosmos literally lives inside of you. Like legitimately, you just physically open. It's almost like you slowly, as you're passing, start shedding
Mm.
that the atoms and the matter that you see like as a solid mass, that all starts to kind of like dissipate, and that cosmic entity starts being released slowly out of it, and then you start becoming everything around you. It's such a like how powerful is that?
It's super powerful, and I think it's so cool that we can play with that and be in that space without physically dying. It's back to death representing more than just the physical death. The ego death comes to mind, where you can literally conceive of yourself as more than Kayla or Jess or whoever, or your occupation at the time. Like you like coming into the oneness and awareness that you are so much more than that, and then going from there, hopefully getting cool stuff from that space, and then bringing it back down to the human journey, which is part of like the dharma, the why are you here, to bring
Hmm.
that little unique spark of the cosmos and then share it with people.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. So I'm curious, do you interact with a lot of people that are like, I want to become a death doula as well, like what do I do? Are you in a mentoring role in that way, or your work is mostly with people in like the death and dying process?
My work is mostly with people who have experienced loss and the
Mm,
loss of themselves.
mm,
So my work is primarily that. I love being in those transitional spaces when I can, but my focus is now helping people understand how to live more fully
yeah.
as themselves. Like, so I'm doing a lot of life coach training right now so that I can fully become a life coach. And I'm, a death doula with a life approach, and I'm going to be a life coach with a death perspective. Like, that's my
Mm,
whole, like, death is life for me. That's
yes.
my whole, like, going to be my motto, my mantra. So, I work with that, and then I also work with the mentorship. So for
Mm,
me, if I can get as many people to do death doulaship, even if that means like taking a course or two or a workshop, that is my way of getting them closer to themselves. There's a
mm,
lot of shadow work involved in the modern death doula, and also the ancient death doula has a lot of shadow work, more like death nesting and like
mm,
making space for others by letting parts of you rest.
mm,
So I actually do both, but it all has the same, I have the same goal in mind for all of it, which is
mhm.
like getting closer to finding who you really are.
Yeah,
And
it's
that
like
comes
whatever door they come through, it's like that same offering is there.
Yeah, because the death doula training is gonna again, it's gonna get you closer to who you are. It's gonna help you understand why you do have fears around death and dying, and why you may have some anxiety. Anxiety is generally the fear of the future and not being able to control that. And like, where does that come from? Because then to me, that sounds like there's a trauma there. Because I'm
Mm,
also trauma informed, right? So then it's like, all right, so let's unpack that, and let's find a safe space and the things that you experienced, and let me validate you and believe you in what you went through. Um, so my end goal really is like, I want people to
mm,
really find themselves in this lifetime.
yeah.
And that comes from a place of I got to find myself. I got to go through the journey of where most people want to be alive, and then slowly like their life force diminishes, like their connection to themselves diminishes over time, and then they get into this routine of existing in the world.
Yep.
I started backwards. I didn't want to
Ah!
be here, right? So like when I was little, this place was awe-inspiring. I remember like
Mm,
pencils used to light me up. I'm like, "Oh my God, there's a pencil." Like I just used to be so amazed by everything here. And then my experience shattered me. And most of my life, I was like trying to put these like pieces of myself back together. And no matter what I did, I always felt so broken. And finding this path, finding this like via my ideation and romanticizing death and dying was actually my calling all along. And so
mm,
like I love life again. Like I
yeah.
don't see when I have a depressive episode as a like I'm failing. It's and Jim Carrey says this. It's funny. He says depression's deep rest. Like depression now tells me like, okay, you're not taking care of yourself. You're spiritually out of alignment. You're not resting enough. You're not sleeping enough. You're not doing for yourself what you should be doing. So now your body is shutting down because it's going to go into a deep rest, and there's no fighting it. You
Yep.
feel like you're walking through mud, you feel anchored, like you're done. And so I see my depression is now this like invitation to look at what I'm not doing for myself to stay in alignment energetically with my
Mhm.
needs, spiritual, physical, mental, all of it.
Mhm.
So I like am so stoked to be alive.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in the world, and I'm still so thrilled to have the opportunity to like find little nuggets of awe and beauty and joy, and like connecting with people and animals. There's no part of me that wants to die anymore. There's like none of that left.
Hmm. Are you of the philosophy that we don't really die? That is to say, we are made up of these particles that make up all of the universe, and when we die, we really just transform into different particles.
So because I'm really into like the quantum state and the quantum
Mm,
consciousness, I'm now theorizing on the multiverse, like multiple
mm,
dimensions, multiple timelines. And because I've had some somewhat near death experiences, like suicide attempt survivor kind of thing, and I'm living a very different life to the one that I started off with and the
Mm.
life that I went through.
Yep.
So instead of it feeling like I'm one person that's on the same timeline, I feel like I'm a different person on a different timeline and we're just sharing the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So because I can't relate to the person that experienced what I experienced when I was 9.
Yep.
I no longer have that. I felt very much a victim. I felt very unsafe in the world. I felt that everyone was dangerous and I couldn't really connect to anyone, right? So I don't have that anymore, but I still have the connection of like that did happen to me, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
no longer affected or influenced by that experience,
Yep. It has
right?
like doesn't have power over you or like over your emotions as your
Yeah.
might
Yeah,
have.
like it's still like I will be sad about the things that I went through, but I'm at that place where I'm so distant from it again because I feel like I'm on a different timeline that I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I can observe it now
Yep.
from a place of neutrality and understanding and support of being like going back to visit my inner little self and being like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I got you. I'm your guiding light. I'm your higher self. And I'm supporting you through this whole process. Like you're protected. Like nothing bad like this is ever going to happen to you again, kind of thing. And like reassuring that they're a badass and like a warrior human being. And like, so I can
Mm-hmm.
still travel back there and have conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what they're experiencing and what they're feeling as they're existing no longer has weight in this lifetime for me. I no longer feel like the world is out to get me like
Mm-hmm.
I used to. Like I'm working through fully showing up in like this very big as a spiritual leader, but that feels different than it did when I was like, oh no, I'm crazy and these things aren't real, you know?
Yep.
So I believe in that. However, there's still the sadness of it. I still have that anxiety around my loved ones leaving this place, whether it's they recycle into a different timeline or energetically they become something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I still believe that this timeline, this life, these moments that we're existing in now
Mm-hmm.
are just this one kind of moment. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a unique moment in and of itself. And so I always say cherish this timeline that you're in now.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I believe in reincarnation or that you come back as a different type of energy or you jump to another timeline, this is still very sacred and very special and very unique. And I want you to find yourself in this timeline, even if you get to exist again.
Exactly.
So that's where my thinking is right now. It's like not concrete. It's just kind of like what I've been playing with.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. Did you get into the quantum consciousness around the same time that you got into the death work, or like how did that get into your awareness?
So I've always really been into kind of quantum consciousness and quantum state. Again, because I come from an atheist family, they're
Mm-hmm.
very science driven, very technological science. And so when AI and stuff first started coming around, dude, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, when conversations started to happen, I immediately was like, that's going to help us explain like the metaphysics,
Mm-hmm.
and I would have conversations like that with my brother with my brothers, because since I was very young, because my background is a performing artist, like a dancer, we learned the history of dance in different cultures. And dance was actually a way to connect to God and and sovereign states, trance states, different states of consciousness. Like, so me right away going to college and understanding that dance is actually a form of connecting to spirit
Mm-hmm.
via so many different cultures, like worldwide, globally, singing and dancing were a way to like connect. Um, I That's when that quantum consciousness really started playing. I'm like, oh, I can connect non-verbally through my body, but also because it's a source of energy and it's a channel
Yep.
and movements and certain very specific like things that we're doing with our body are sigils and incantations and grids. So that's what got me into that kind of quantum understanding, and then I was always open to it from that place.
Okay.
But very recently, doing the work that I'm doing, when asked like these questions, and going, wait a second, so how do I feel about stuff? Because people are like, oh, so you're a witch and you're a mystic and you believe in mysticism. And I'm like, well, actually, I feel more like a star seed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done past life regressions, and those past life regressions, I look like some sort of scientist. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I look at like someone who's like a high priestess in any cultures, or like a shaman or a medicine person, medicine woman, medicine man, they really are also that in between, between God consciousness, right? That source, energetic source connection, and the earth plane. Like this dimension and that dimension, they're that connected in between. They're the people that are translating what the gods are saying,
Mm-hmm.
what universe is saying, what source is saying. So that's more what it feels like. I'm like that in between translator. And the way I would describe that is like I'm tapped into source on a quantum realm. So when I'm channeling, I tell people I'm astral projecting into into your subconscious. I'm able to communicate with your higher self. That's really the realm you exist in,
Mm-hmm.
is that state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's really how I started kind of more rounding out this idea of quantum state, which is also
Mm-hmm.
like a form of God state,
Yeah,
right?
so it started off almost like a scientific mindset, and it's evolved into like a worldview and like whole way of being and interacting with people, which I personally love. If anything, I just think it's more fun to play with that wider level of awareness,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, it's really funny because I used to have this conversation with my family where they're like, they're very science driven and technology driven, and I'm like, explain to me how a light switch works. Like really explain to me, right? And you can look at it, and I'm like, okay, so you believe in like frequencies, and you believe in like different wavelengths, and radio waves and things floating around that you can't see, but somehow spirit doesn't work in the same way. You don't think that, and then my husband got really sick, so he has chronic Lyme disease. He's in remission now, and we ended up going the traditional Western route for medicine, and they were just treating symptoms
Yeah.
individually. Then I said, because I was like a vegetarian at the time, very earth grounded, earthbound in that way, and I was like, we need to start seeing natural doctors. Like, I'll take you to a curandera if I have to, like since you do like the limpia and the egg cleaning and all that stuff. Well, I don't, or we have to start opening our mind to different things.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually we found a doctor who actually practices quantum medicine
Oh my gosh, yes.
and healed him. Like my husband's alive because we did these
Oh,
bioresonance frequency treatments, because we did go into the Chinese medicine of acupuncture and full body integrative medical support, and then discovered things like ozone therapy,
mm-hmm.
and that's what healed him. And my mom went through the same. My mom was very sick just about a year ago. She started seeing our doctor, and my mom was using a walker, a cane, was in chronic pain every day, levels 9 and 10, like top pain levels, was starting to like show signs, indications of like Alzheimer's. And my mom now is like lost 20-30 pounds, walking around like speed walking, tried to run the other day, and my mom is 70. So
Mm-hmm.
just seeing how there's more to our bodies and the very physical things we see. There's like an energy to it. Our
Mm-hmm.
doctor reads chi like off of a machine. It
Yep.
tells you like the levels of your chi, which is the energy in your body, how you are cycling your own energy internally, whether you have the blockages, where do you need support, upper, lower, mid. And this is like an actual medical doctor. He like legitimately has his like MD. It's not a naturopath. So this is the future. This is really what we're starting to step into when we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, biofields, stem cells, quantum medicine, quantum mechanics, quantum computing. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm super excited to see where we can go. So we are at like the hour mark. I want to
Oh
be
yeah.
mindful of your time. I've so appreciated this conversation. I love being able to talk about death so casually and from that empowered state. I did have one question. Speaking of the empowerment, what are your thoughts if you want to share them on right to die?
Oh, like when you want to go, you should be able to go.
That whole thing, yeah.
So because I come from that space, I just want to say it takes a lot for someone to get to that place.
Mm.
It takes you going against every natural survival mechanism in your body and in your mind to get to a place of like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's understanding the amount of suffering and pain that someone is going through. They feel trapped in their own mind, in their own body. And I'm not one to I'm not one to pass judgment or to impose my own belief systems on anyone.
Mm.
My role, even as a human being, but as a death doula in particular,
Mm-hmm.
is to hold space and support people for whatever it is that they feel that they need.
Mm-hmm.
So someone's choice to not want to be here was not easily made.
Mm.
So I think that needs some awareness, um, and that it's not up to me to tell someone how much they're suffering.
Mm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It's back to the essence of empowerment, like putting that decision in the person's hands, empathizing with what they could, the state that they would be in to even make that decision, and then doing your best to support whatever someone's wishes would be.
Yeah, because it's not my role to keep someone here.
Mm.
My role is to try to um, give them hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hope of better understanding themselves. But I mean, where is that person in their life?
Mm-hmm.
I can try to help navigate them to the next day, but what's going to get them to the place where they feel safe in their own mind and their own body,
Mm-hmm.
where they feel seen and heard, acknowledged, loved, supported? Like, we don't know what people are going through. And
Mm-hmm.
we also don't know exactly how people feel inside of themselves, their spirit, their mind. I can only tell you from what I experienced, it felt like I was trapped.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I like to tell people when I have people come onto one of my lives on TikTok and they start
Mm-hmm.
calling me demonic, or they start saying that I'm, guiding everyone down a satanic path. I always say things like, I've already been to hell. I've already been there. You don't need to tell me
Mm-hmm.
that I'm guiding people towards that. I'm actually telling you, as someone who's been in their own hell, that this is nothing. This is nowhere near that experience of, like, you're in a burning building with no way out. You're suffocating to death, and you're there like in an eternal kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like when, again, for me, when I was in that space of not wanting to be alive, like, I couldn't get out of my own mind.
Yeah.
I couldn't get out of that feeling of being trapped in my own body. That the pain and the suffering was forever.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you how do you deny that for anyone who's like, look, I can't, I'm in so much pain. Like, I feel like there's really nothing worth living for
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just in this constant state of suffering. What, why? This is torture. This is
Mm-hmm.
absolute torture being here like this. Like, who am I to convince you otherwise?
Mm-hmm. They're like,
You
I want to
know?
hop to a cooler timeline. It's like, well, maybe do it.
I'm again, I'm trying to help people get to that place of look, I can help you find a way out,
Mm.
but you have to understand, like, it's going to take an immense amount of work, but you're going to be supported through it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can sit there with that and talk to people from that place of saying, like, I've been there and I can definitely show you, like, their exits. There's one that way, there's one that way, for trying to help yourself get out of this feeling of being trapped, at least for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you help someone navigate for the rest of it?
Yeah.
Right? So it's easy to say, like, hey, I don't want you to kill yourself. I'm gonna miss you. Think about your children. Think about your loved one, your parents, whatever it may be. But what if we started thinking about, like, well, how did this person get to that place of, like, not wanting to be here?
Yep.
How do I support someone from that place? Because, uh, how do you even begin to understand that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I can say what I had needed, I would have really, really loved to have had while I was in those moments of pain and suffering and sorrow would have been, I believe you.
Mm.
Hey, Jess, I believe you. I believe that your suffering is so intense and so huge that you can't see another way out. That you're so in it that you don't see that you're actually not trapped.
Mm.
That what you see is all you've known so far. But let me help you. There's this other road you can take because look, you've already been through hell and back, right? You've already been through hell. Let's try something different. Because what's the worst that can happen? More
Mm-hmm.
hell? You've already experienced it. Like let's try something else. And my stuff had to do with more of like not being accepted for who I was, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to me, not being accepted for who I was, not being validated, not being seen, not being sat with, like not having someone just hold space without trying to fix me,
Mm-hmm.
and not having someone say, I believe you. I believe that you're in so much turmoil, so much suffering that you want to not be here anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
get that. I totally get that. And I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that you're in the depths of that kind of hell,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that would have helped me at least realize like someone came into my hell with me and was like, look, all right, I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here. Shit, this place sucks. Holy, dude, this is where you
Mm-hmm.
live? This is fucking terrible. Like I would feel the exact same way you do. This is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that place where I can start regulating again, not trying to find just like the quickest way out,
Yeah.
then going like, all right, there are options. What are my other options? What am I really dealing with right now? For me, it was self-sacrificing, martyrdom, not feeling good enough, feeling like I had to be this good girl all the time, so I had to hide myself. Not telling anyone what I had gone through because the uncle was a huge part of our family and was a support system. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew my family, not my immediate family, but my external family would have turned against me and my family if I had said anything. So there would have been this like persecution that would have happened. Um, all of that. And going, all right, what are my options here? You
Mm-hmm.
know, because the only world that I see is the one that feels like a hell.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other options, right? Is there another world I could live in that doesn't feel like this? And eventually, yeah, I found that there was, but that took a lot of time. And it took a lot
Mm-hmm.
of me jumping over to that other road and being like, shit, I've already been through hell. Like, this can't be any worse.
Mm-hmm.
Leaning into my crazy, going, you know what? I'd rather like me than not like me and other people still not like me, because I
Yeah.
was constantly trying to fit in and people just knew. They're like, this isn't, no, something's off. I'd always get that from people. Something seems off when I'm trying to be something outside of myself. So I just
Mm-hmm.
leaned in hard to the crazy, to the weird, to the dark, to the death, to all of it. And now that I'm happy, no, I don't ever get questioned. People
Mm-hmm.
don't go, I think you're up to no good because it seems like you're hiding something. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, no, this is who you are. Cool. Take it or leave it. Right. But at least I love myself now.
Yeah.
Where when I wanted to not be here, I didn't. I didn't because I didn't even like myself because I was trying to appease other people and what they wanted from me.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like me,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's just, I know that was like a lengthy, but that's really, that's not for me to say or to keep people here. It's just for me to hopefully get to them at some point in their lives and tell them, hey, you have options.
Yeah.
But if this is too much for you, like, I understand that too.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you so much for sharing. It's so beautiful the opportunities we get to navigate not only the darker spaces, but to navigate being supported and seen in those spaces or realize that's what we were wanting and needing and didn't get, and then can know
Mm.
that moving forward. And then rising to better different places, like to get the experience to be a human for all that it is and isn't is just so I'm seeing the beauty in that once it zoomed out farther, you know, I'm like, how freaking cool.
Yeah, because in that space too, there's judgment when someone tells you like, "Why would you do that? Why would you want to kill yourself?"
Mm-hmm.
So you feel like more of a failure. You
Mm-hmm.
feel like, "Damn, I can't even like want to kill myself, right?" You know what I mean? And that's just
Right.
so ridiculous. It's like, guys, this isn't about you. And I say that a lot, now when I'm talking to like say family members when they're like, I can't believe you ever wanted to do that. Like, how could you do that to your family, to your mom? Like, how devastated would she would have been? She would have been so devastated. And then I always say, me wanting to kill myself has nothing to do with you. It
Mm-hmm.
had to do with everything that I was experiencing and feeling at that time that should tell you what the extent of how I was feeling, what I was experiencing was like.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Exactly.
that's an extreme. That is a holy you're wherever you are is not okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
and not in a judgmental way is like you're not safe. You
Mm-hmm.
don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel safe to be alive, well, that's terrible. That's so tragic.
Mm-hmm.
How do you that's what people should be asking. Not the like, hey, don't kill yourself, like you're gonna leave
No.
all these people behind.
Yeah, I
Go
love
like,
that. I love the empathetic space of like going into that hell space with them and being like, "Oh, this is shitty. I would feel like shit too. Like,
I would want to kill myself
do you
too
want
in
to
this
go
place.
out the window? Like, what are you trying to do? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hey man, what do you need? Like this place, let's
yeah,
break out. Let's
like
break out.
we
Like
could
how
do
to
the dishes. We could, like complete
yeah.
the internal spiritual house.
Yeah, because I think that's what a lot of at least for me, again, speaking for myself, is I was really afraid of putting people through that. Like
Mm-hmm.
them experiencing the fact that I didn't want to live or
Mm-hmm.
even trying to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Like putting people through that would add to it. I was like, how am
Yeah,
I even gonna like have this conversation with my mom or my brothers about like I don't want to be here? Like, how do
yeah.
you even start having that conversation? Um, because you start seeing the pain, you feel it. Like I was so sensitive to everyone and everything, and I would just sense the worry, the complete like all hands on deck. Holy crap! Like, this is a problem? How do we fix this? How do we keep her from killing herself? I
Mm-hmm.
would sense that
Yeah.
versus the oh my God, honey, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I understand. This is massive.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. How can I be here for you right now?
Mm-hmm.
How can I sit with you in all this and not trying to talk me down, not trying to talk me out of it, just anchor in, hold that space and go, fuck. Oh, this is big. Okay. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like write it out with me. And that was hard. Like I was never able to have that conversation with any of my family members,
Mm-hmm.
even after the fact. And that's something that I think more people need support with is again just holding space in general for all the really deep, dark, heavy things that we tend to carry alone and do alone.
Mm-hmm.
Have someone just step in and be like, "All right, I'm in it with you. Let's do this. What's
Mm-hmm.
up? All right, I believe you. This is bad. This is
Mm-hmm.
terrible. I'm here."
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Mm. Yes, thank you so much again for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful just keeps coming to mind. I'm just like, what a beautiful opportunity to step into that space with someone and meet them there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation. I don't It's something I'm really stepping into more is talking about suicide ideation and why people feel the way they do about not,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and all this work has been leading me to start having more conversations about this. So I appreciate the
Mm-hmm.
total like invite to step into this.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you for taking the invitation and stepping in. Where can people find you and get connected with you?
So we talked about Instagram. So I definitely live on Instagram. It's the .death.empath. And then my TikTok is the same. TikTok, I like to talk about these things. If it's like you talked about the reels earlier, the videos from so many different ways that are my personality. Like there's definitely this very deep, serious side to me, but there's also this like really silly, kind of funky side to me. And I don't ever shy away from like deep conversations. So on the TikTok side, you'll see more of like I'll do readings on my lives, oracle readings. I'll have people work with me as I'm like doing my workshops. I'll do like on the spot channels, like channeling people to see if I get any insights. I'll read from a book, do grief meditations. It's really kind of like all up in the air. I took my live out one time on a bike ride to go see the sunset.
Yeah, it's just like
So
welcome to my world.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then like the Instagram is more like I'll talk about like workshops that are coming up and resources. So yeah.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for sharing and thank you for your time, all of the jewels that you were able to spread. I hope that any being on any plane of any dimension that was able to connect with the conversation we just had got to feel even just a glimpse of empowerment or excitement or the sense of beauty or even just getting met on the, oh, yes, I've been shrinking or hiding. I can step more into my power. Who knows who will show up to support me, but I'll trust in that. So yeah, that's what I'm excited for.
Yay.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.